The massive chamber stretched out like a cathedral made of living crystal, its walls pulsing with soft blue light that had witnessed 1,000 years of galactic decisions. 12 different species sat in their designated seats, each one representing civilizations that had mastered space travel when Earth was still learning to make fire. The air hummed with translation devices, turning alien languages into a symphony of diplomatic protocol. Commander Lee Sungmin stood at the center of it all, feeling very small and very human. His dark uniform looked plain compared to the flowing robes and gleaming armor of the alien delegates round him. Behind him, Ambassador Park Ji-woo adjusted his tie one last time, while Dr. Kim So-ra clutched her tablet containing humanity's entire scientific achievements. High. Arbiter Velta rose from her towering seat, her 6 purple eyes focusing on the human delegation like a predator studying prey. She stood 12 feet tall, her crystalline skin reflecting the chamber's light in rainbow patterns. When she spoke, her voice echoed from speakers hidden throughout the walls. The petition of the species known as humans has been reviewed by this council, she announced, her tone suggesting she was discussing something mildly unpleasant. We have examined your technological capabilities, your social structures, and your historical records. Commander Lee felt his heart racing. Months of preparation had led to this moment. Humanity had worked for decades to reach this point, to stand before the most powerful organization in the galaxy and ask for acceptance. They had built faster-than-light ships, established colonies on distant worlds, and proven they could survive in the vast emptiness of space. Your species shows certain primitive capabilities, continued Velta, and Lee could hear the dismissal already forming in her words. However, the Council has determined that humanity lacks the necessary development for membership in galactic society. Representative Morgak of the Trade Syndicate leaned forward in his seat. His species looked like walking trees made of metal, with glowing orange sap flowing through transparent tubes in his bark-like skin. The humans fight wars among themselves, he said, his mechanical voice crackling with static. Even now, as they explore space, they carry weapons and maintain armies. How can we trust a species that cannot achieve peace on its own world? Dr. Kim So-ra stepped forward, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Honorable delegates, humanity has made great progress in recent decades. Our global conflicts have decreased significantly, and we have united in our space exploration efforts. We have developed medical technologies that could benefit many species, and our agricultural innovations have allowed us to terraform previously uninhabitable worlds. Councillor Vexar of the Science Guild made a sound that the translators rendered as laughter. Her species resembled giant jellyfish floating in mechanical suits filled with purple gas. Your medical technologies are crude copies of systems we discarded centuries ago, she said through her suit speakers. Your terraforming techniques are borrowed from civilizations that mastered such arts when your son was young. You have achieved nothing that we consider truly innovative. Ambassador Park Ji-woo cleared his throat and stepped forward. With respect, we acknowledge that we are newcomers to galactic society. But newcomers often bring fresh perspectives and new solutions to old problems. We ask only for the chance to prove ourselves as contributing members of this council. High Arbiter Velta's expression remained unchanged. The council has made its decision. Humanity is too volatile, too aggressive, and too technologically primitive to join our organization. Your species shows potential, but that potential is buried beneath centuries of warfare, environmental destruction, and social chaos. She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering the final blow. Perhaps in a few centuries, when your people have learned to control their violent instincts and have developed truly original technologies, you may submit another petition. Until then, Humanity will remain outside the boundaries of civilized galactic society. The chamber fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support systems. Commander Lee felt the weight of rejection settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. All their preparations, all their hopes, dismissed with the casual indifference of beings who saw humans as nothing more than clever animals who had learned to build spaceships. Representative Mulgak added his own insult to the wound. We suggest your species focus on achieving planetary unity before seeking galactic membership. Learn to live in peace with your own kind before you ask to join those who have mastered such arts. Dr. Kim Sora's grip tightened on her tablet. She had spent years documenting humanity's achievements, preparing presentations that would showcase their potential. None of it mattered to these ancient species who looked at humans and saw only primitives with borrowed technology. The three humans exchanged glances, communicating without words in the way that their species had perfected over millennia of cooperation and conflict. There was disappointment in their eyes, but also something else, something that the council members, despite all their advanced technologies and ancient wisdom, failed to recognize. It was determination. The human delegation left the crystal chamber in silence, their footsteps echoing in the vast corridors of the council station. Behind them, the 12 species returned to their regular business, already forgetting about the primitive humans who had dared to seek membership among their ranks. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. 6 months after the rejection, Captain Yu Minho guided his cargo ship through the asteroid belt of the Kepler system, a region the Galactic Council had marked as too dangerous and unprofitable for regular trade routes. His ship was different from the sleek council vessels that occasionally passed through the outer systems. It looked rougher, built for function rather than beauty, with extra armor plating and modified engines that hummed with a sound no alien engineer would. Recognize, Captain, we have 3 more requests for medical supplies from the mining colonies, reported Engineer Choi Hyjin from her station. Her fingers danced across controls that mixed human design with alien technology in ways that would have puzzled the Council's experts. They're offering rare metals in exchange. Metals the Council said were impossible to extract from those asteroids. Yoon smiled as he adjusted their course toward a small space station that appeared on no official Council maps. The station belonged to the Vector, a species of silicon-based life forms that the Council had dismissed as too primitive because they lived in extreme heat that would kill most other species. But the Vector were excellent miners and, surprisingly, creative engineers when given the right tools. Tell them we'll be there in for us, Yoon said, and remind them that we'll need those new heat-resistant materials they developed. Dr. Kim's team wants to test them in our next terraforming project, back on Earth. President Nan Tai-sung stood before the Global Assembly in the Rebuild United Nations building. The room was packed with representatives from every nation, their faces showing a mixture of anger and determination that had become common since the Council's rejection. They called us too primitive, Nam said, his voice carrying to every corner of the assembly hall. They said we fight too much, that we destroy our environment, that we steal their old technology instead of creating our own. Well, let me show you what primitives can accomplish. The massive screens round the hall lit up with data streams, showing humanity's progress over the past 6 months. New colonies had been established in systems the Council avoided. Trade networks had been created with dozens of species that the galactic government ignored. Most importantly, human scientists had not just copied alien technology, but had improved it in ways their original creators never imagined. The water purification systems we installed on Voltaire Station are now producing twice the clean water the Council's old systems could manage, Nam continued. Our atmospheric processes have made 3 previously uninhabitable worlds suitable for farming, and our medical centers have saved thousands of lives across 15 different species. In the audience, Dr. Limboro nodded as she reviewed reports from the terraforming teams. She had spent years studying council records about failed planetary development projects, worlds they had written off as impossible to settle. But human engineers approached problems differently. Where the council saw obstacles, humans saw puzzles to solve. The council thinks we're just copying their work, she had told her team just last week. But we're doing something they never learned how to do. We're making their technology better. On the edge of council space, Diplomat Han Yeran sat across from representatives of 12 different species in a meeting room that looked more like a marketplace than a government building. The species gathered here were all ones the council had overlooked or dismissed. Some were too small to matter in galactic politics. Others lived in environments too harsh for most council members to visit. A few had technologies the council considered outdated or useless. The council offers you trade agreements that barely cover the cost of transport, Han said, gesturing to a holographic display showing trade route maps. They sell you outdated equipment at high prices and expect you to be grateful for their attention. But what if there was another way? The Zephyrian representative, a creature that looked like a walking cloud of silver dust, sparkled with interest. Humans offer better terms. We offer partnership, Han replied. Our ships can handle the radiation storms your system produces. Our medical technology can help your people live longer. And our agricultural methods can grow food in the harsh soil of your worlds. In exchange, your people are the best navigators in the galaxy. Your knowledge of stellar phenomena could help us develop faster, safer travel routes. The meeting continued for hours, with each species offering unique capabilities that the Council had never bothered to recognize. The arthropod-like creature had developed amazing construction techniques for building in zero gravity. The aquatic Murdol had created underwater cities that could be adapted for hostile planets. The energy-based Luxoni could power entire colonies using methods the Council considered impossible. Within a year, the Independent Trade Network had connected 47 different species across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Human ships carried goods and people along routes that avoided Council checkpoints. Human engineers worked alongside alien specialists to solve problems that had puzzled the galactic government for centuries. Human diplomats facilitated agreements between species that had never been allowed to trade with each other under Council regulations. The galaxy was changing, and for the first time in 1,000 years, that change was not being directed by the 12 ancient species who had ruled from their crystal chambers. It was being driven by a species they had dismissed as too primitive to matter. A species that had turned rejection into motivation and had decided to show the universe exactly what humans could accomplish when they refused to accept limitations others placed on them. 2 years had passed since the Council's rejection, and Admiral Ko Jae-hyun stood in the command center of Terra Station, watching data streams that would have been impossible to imagine when humanity first knocked on the Council's door. The station itself was a marvel that combined human engineering with technologies from 30 different species, creating something that looked like no other structure in the galaxy. Admiral, we have another request from the hegemony worlds, reported Intelligence Officer Shin Da-yoon, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction that had become common among the human diplomatic corps. 3 more of their agricultural planets want to purchase our soil enhancement systems. They're offering to pay double the standard Council rates. Ko smiled as he studied the galactic trade reports flowing across his screens. The numbers told a story that would have seemed like fantasy just 2 years ago. Council trade monopolies were crumbling across the outer systems. Their carefully controlled supply chains were being replaced by faster, more efficient networks run by species they had ignored for centuries. What about the medical requests? Ko asked, pulling up another data stream. 15 Council worlds have now requested emergency medical supplies through intermediary channels, Shin replied. They're using third-party traders to hide the fact that they're buying human-designed equipment. Our plague-resistant vaccines have stopped 3 separate disease outbreaks that Council medicine couldn't handle. The irony wasn't lost on Co. The same council that had called humans to primitive to join galactic society was now secretly relying on human innovations to solve problems their ancient technologies couldn't address. But they were too proud to admit it publicly. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Limenseo guided her diplomatic vessel through the crystal cities of Vex Prime, one of the Council's most important manufacturing worlds. She wasn't there. On official business, officially, humans were still banned from entering Council core systems, but the local government had quietly invited her through back channels. Desperate for solutions to problems that had been growing worse for decades. Captain, the pollution levels in their industrial zones are 40% higher than anything we've seen, reported environmental specialist Park Dongwook from his scan station. Their old purification systems can't handle the toxic waste from their quantum refineries. Lee nodded as she reviewed the situation. The Vex had been using the same industrial processes for 800 years. Processes that had worked fine when their population was smaller. But growth had created problems their ancient methods couldn't solve. The Council's response had been to simply accept the pollution as the price of progress. Show them what our atmospheric scrubbers can do, Lee ordered, and let them know we can have a full cleanup system installed within 6 months. Not 6 years like the Council's Environmental Committee promised them. The demonstration was spectacular. Human-designed atmospheric processes cleared the air above an entire industrial district in just 4 hours, something Council technology had never achieved within days. 5 more Council worlds had sent secret requests for a similar systems. In the Council chambers themselves, the mood had shifted from dismissive confidence to barely controlled panic. High Arbiter Velta reviewed reports that grew more disturbing with each passing month. The humans weren't just competing with Council services, they were making those services obsolete. The independent trade network now controls 37% of all commerce in the outer spiral arms, reported Councillor Vexar, her mechanical suit trembling with agitation. Their shipping routes are faster than ours, their prices are lower, and their technology actually works better than equipment we've been using for centuries. Representative Morgak's metallic bark was turning a dull orange color that indicated extreme stress. It's worse than that. 7 of our member species have formally requested to join the human coalition. They claim our representation is inadequate, and that humanity offers them better opportunities for growth. The worst part, from the Council's perspective, was that the humans weren't being aggressive or threatening. They didn't demand territory or resources. They simply offered better alternatives to everything the Council provided. Their diplomatic approach was frustratingly reasonable, instead of conquest. They practiced cooperation instead of demanding tribute. They offered mutual benefit. They're solving problems we've had for generations, admitted Councillor Keelanox of the Defense Guild, a species that looked like walking crystal formations. The border disputes between the Kethari and the Moldar systems have been settled. The humans mediated a solution in 3 weeks that our diplomats couldn't achieve in 3 decades. Velda S6 eyes focused on the tactical display showing human influence spreading throughout the galaxy like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Everywhere humans went, they left behind improvements, better technology, resolved conflicts, new opportunities for species that had been ignored or marginalized. How did we miss this? She asked quietly. How did we fail to see what they were capable of? The question hung in there. Aaron answered. The truth was uncomfortable for beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They had become so focused on maintaining their position that they had stopped innovating. They had grown so comfortable with their power that they had forgotten what it meant to earn that power through service and improvement. Outside the council chambers, the galaxy continued to change. Human ships carried goods and people along routes that bypassed council control entirely. Human technologies solved problems the ancient government had learned to accept as unsolvable. And human diplomacy created alliances that threatened to make the council irrelevant in their own galaxy. The disruption was complete, and there was no going back. High Arbiter Velta stood before the massive viewing window in her private chambers, staring out at the stars that had seemed so secure under council rule just 3 years ago. Her 6 purple eyes reflected the light from distant suns, but her expression showed none of the confidence that had once defined her leadership. Behind her, the communication ray hummed with urgent messages from council worlds demanding solutions to problems that seemed to grow worse each day. The numbers were impossible to ignore anymore. 43% of galactic trade now flowed through human networks. Each council member species had formally requested to join the human coalition, and dozens more were secretly negotiating with human representatives. Most humiliating of all, 6 council worlds were now entirely dependent on human technology to maintain their basic infrastructure. Arbiter, the human delegation has arrived, announced her aide. A nervous young Kethari, whose blue skin had turned pale with anxiety. Ambassador Park Jiwoo is requesting a formal audience. Velta closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the confident dismissal she had delivered 3 years ago. The same human who had stood quietly while she called his species to primitive was now returning to negotiate from a position of strength that the council could barely comprehend. "Send them to Conference Chamber Alpha," she said finally, "and ensure they receive full diplomatic honors." The words tasted bitter in her mouth. But pride was a luxury the council could no longer afford. In the conference chamber, Ambassador Park Jiwoo sat across from the full council assembly. But the dynamics had completely reversed from their first meeting, where once the humans had stood as petitioners. Now the council found themselves in the uncomfortable position of needing something from people they had rejected. President Nam Tai-sun leaned back in his chair, studying the 12 species that had once seemed so powerful and untouchable. Admiral Ko Jae-hyun sat beside him, tablet displaying real-time data about council worlds requesting human assistance. Dr. Kim Sora reviewed reports from human colonies that were now more prosperous than many council core worlds. "The council wishes to extend a formal invitation for humanity to join our organization," Velta began, her voice lacking the commanding tone she had used years earlier. "We recognize that our previous assessment may have been premature." Park raised an eyebrow but said nothing, letting the silence stretch until Representative Morgak shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The metallic being's sap flowed faster through his transparent tubes, a clear sign of stress. "We understand that humanity has achieved remarkable progress," Morgak added, his mechanical voice struggling to find the right words. "Your innovations have solved problems that we had not prioritized adequately." Dr. Lim Bora, who had revolutionized terraforming across 27 worlds, finally spoke. "Problems you had not prioritized. The atmospheric poisoning on Vex Prime had been killing thousands for decades. The water shortage on the Altarian colonies had been labeled acceptable losses in your reports. The trade barriers preventing smaller species from accessing galactic markets had been called necessary for stability." Her voice remained calm, but her words cut deep. Every example she cited was a problem the council had ignored, dismissed, or simply accepted as the cost of maintaining their power structure. President Nam leaned forward, his expression serious. "You're offering us membership in an organization that spent centuries maintaining the status quo while problems went unsolved and entire species were marginalized. But the galaxy has changed. We have changed it. He activated a holographic display that filled the center of the conference chamber. The map showed the current state of galactic civilization, with human influence highlighted in blue. The blue covered nearly half the galaxy, connected by trade routes, diplomatic agreements, and technological partnerships that had transformed how entire sectors operated. We now have formal treaties with 68 independent worlds. Nam continued. Our trade networks serve 312 different species. Our medical facilities have saved over 40 million lives in the past year alone, and we've done this while maintaining peace and cooperation among groups that your council had written off as incompatible. Admiral Ko activated another display showing military capabilities. Our defensive technologies protect 47 star systems, not through conquest or intimidation, but because those systems requested our protection after your council failed to respond to their security needs. The most damaging revelation came when Dr. Kim So-ra presented the innovation reports. In 3 years, human research teams have developed solutions to 86 problems that council scientists had declared unsolvable. We've improved upon council technology in every major category, and we've shared these innovations freely with any species that wanted them. Councillor Vexar's mechanical suit trembled as she processed the implications. You're saying, you no longer need us. We're saying the galaxy no longer needs the old system. Park replied carefully. The question isn't whether humanity should join the Council. The question is whether the Council is ready to join the new galactic community we've helped create. The chamber fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support systems. For the first time in their recorded history, the 12 ancient species of the Galactic Council found themselves facing a choice they had never imagined having to make. They could adapt to a galaxy where they were no longer the ultimate authority, or they could watch their relevance fade entirely as progress continued without them. The new Galactic Federation Assembly met in a space station unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. The structure floated in neutral space between the old Council territory and the human coalition. Worlds, built jointly by engineers from over 100 different species, its design mixed flowing organic curves with geometric precision, creating something that looked both ancient and futuristic at the same time. Former High Arbiter Velta walked through corridors where her footsteps echoed alongside those of beings she had once considered beneath the Council's notice. The silicon-based vector miners worked beside crystalline Keelonox engineers. The aquatic Murdoll swam through water-filled tubes that ran parallel to air-filled walkways. Species that had never been allowed to meet under Council rule now collaborated daily on projects that would have been impossible under the old system. She found herself in the main assembly hall, a vast spherical chamber where representatives from 347 different species could gather simultaneously. The old council chambers had only accommodated 12 species, with everyone else excluded from decision-making. This new space accommodated everyone, from the largest gas giant dwellers to the smallest asteroid miners. Admiral Ko Jae-hyun stood at the central podium, addressing the assembly in words that were translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. His uniform looked simple compared to the elaborate ceremonial dress the council had once required, but his presence commanded attention in a way that had nothing to do with artificial authority. 3 years ago, humanity was told we weren't ready for galactic civilization, Ko said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. We were called to primitive, to violent, to chaotic to join the established order. And in a way, that judgment was correct. We weren't ready to accept limitations that others wanted to place on us. In the audience, Former Representative Mogak took notes on human organizational theories he was implementing in his own territory. The metallic being had initially resisted the changes, but the results spoke for themselves. Trade in his systems had increased by 200%. Industrial accidents had dropped to nearly zero thanks to human safety innovations. Most importantly, his people were happier and more prosperous than they had been in centuries. The old council believed that civilization meant maintaining order through control. Co continued. But true civilization emerges from cooperation, innovation, and the courage to challenge problems instead of accepting them as permanent fixtures. Dr. Kim So-ra sat in the scientific advisory section, surrounded by researchers from dozens of species who had once been excluded from council scientific programs. Together, they had solved problems that the old government's limited membership had struggled with for generations. The cure for the wasting disease that had plagued the outer colonies came from combining human medical knowledge with Altarian biochemistry and vector mineral processing. No single species could have developed it alone. President Nam Tai-sung rose to deliver the closing address of the Assembly's first session. Her words would be recorded and transmitted to every inhabited world in the galaxy, marking the official end of the old order and the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. When the Council rejected humanity's membership application, they told us to focus on achieving planetary unity before seeking galactic membership, Nam said. But we learned something important during our exclusion. True unity doesn't come from everyone thinking the same way or following the same rules. It comes from everyone having the opportunity to contribute their unique strengths to common goals. The holographic displays around the chamber showed the current state of galactic civilization. Crime rates had dropped across most systems as economic opportunities expanded. Scientific advancement had accelerated as researchers from different species shared knowledge freely. Even military conflicts had decreased as the new diplomatic corps, trained in human-developed mediation techniques, resolved disputes before they could escalate to violence. In the observation galleries, former Councillor Lexara watched the proceedings with a mixture of amazement and regret. Her species had spent 8 centuries believing they were protecting galactic stability by limiting change and controlling advancement. Now she could see that their stability had actually been stagnation, preventing the galaxy from reaching its full potential. As delegates dispersed to return to their home worlds, many carrying new partnerships and technological innovations they had negotiated during the assembly. Dr. Lim Bo-ra stood at an observation deck with Ambassador Park Ji-woo. Below them, the station's docking bays hosted ships from hundreds of species, all working together on projects that would have been impossible under the old council system. They said we weren't ready for their civilization, Park observed, watching a human medical ship dock alongside a vector mining vessel and a murder research platform. But maybe their civilization wasn't ready for us. Lim smiled as she watched the organized chaos of species working together in ways the galaxy had never seen before. We didn't just prove them wrong about humanity, we proved them wrong about what the galaxy could become when everyone has a voice and every species has the chance to contribute. The stars beyond the observation deck seemed brighter now, illuminated not just by their nuclear fires, but by the potential of civilizations that had finally learned to work together instead of simply coexisting under the rule of a privileged few. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and in doing so, it had underestimated itself. Now, with those limitations removed, there was no telling how far they could all go together. Retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.